Do you know what you're doing?
Lisa, you don't spend 10 years as a homicidal maniac without learning a few things about dynamite.
Hey guys, it's Just the Regular Guy here from the Dragon Ladies channel, and I have a brand new deck profile for you guys, especially if you're feeling a little trolly. So I decided to take my first shot at doing a deck profile because the last time I tried to do it I made it run on way too long. But for those of you that feel like bringing a bit of an extra trolley deck to your locals to try, I came across this deck seen online, but I haven't seen anyone do a really formal profile of it. So I just wanted to show you guys what it is and what the deck is called. What I'm personally calling it is Dynamite FTK. It's a deck that can literally kill your opponent in one turn. But the key thing with this deck is that you absolutely need to go first. So just pray that the dice roll works in your favor, and if you do go first, you actually got a really good opportunity of killing your opponent on the first turn. I actually brought this deck to our locals on Sunday, and I went 2 wins, 2 losses, and a tie. So the way I look at it, that's a little victory in my eyes. So certainly I'll show you what the deck is, and you guys can add your own little touches to it, and I certainly hope you enjoy it. So let's get started. So first of all, we have 3 Lilith, Lady of the Laments. So what she does is that if this card is normal summoned, its original attack becomes 1,000, quick effect, which means you can activate it on both your turn or your opponent's turn. You contribute 1 dark monster, including herself, and reveal 3 normal traps from your deck. Your opponent randomly chooses one for you to set on the field and shuffle the rest back into your deck, and you can only use the effect of her once per turn. So she is going to be your normal summon, and the first target that you want to go with her is Banquet of Millions. If you have Banquet of Millions already in your opening hand, then the next target you should go for is definitely D.D Dynamite. So absolutely necessary in this deck. So next card we have 3 Necroface. So for those who are familiar with my Banished, Inferno Tempest Banished deck profile, you all know what this does. If this card gets banished face up, you and your opponent has to banish the top 5 cards of your deck to the banished zone. And if this card does get normal summoned, then you can return all banished cards both to the deck and to the extra deck, and the card will gain 100 attack for every card that's returned to the main deck, and this actually applies to both you and your opponent. So one good use with Necroface, besides the actual banishing effect, is that this is a good card to actually replenish your extra deck if you want to use Banquet of Millions again. Alright, so the next card should be no stranger to my Inferno Tempest Banished deck. We have 3 Grand Maju. Now, the Grand Maju is not a key condition in this deck. It's more of a secondary win condition in case you cannot get your main combo to go off. Anyone who's familiar with any Banish strategy is well aware of what this card does. The card gains attack and defense equal to the number of your banished cards times 400. So if you have 10 banished cards, it has an attack and a defense of 4,000, but it only applies to your banished cards only, not your opponent's. Alright, with regards to hand traps, we only use 3, and we use Droll, which personally I think is the best hand trap in the format right now, since there's a lot of decks that add cards from deck to hand. So if a card is added from the main deck to your opponent's hand, except during the draw phase, quick effect, you can send this card from your hand to the graveyard for the rest of the turn. Cards cannot be added from either player's deck to the hand. Now, this card has a secondary purpose. This is a great card to combine with another trap card in this deck, which is Trickstar Reincarnation. If your opponent does not have Ash, and you have a Trickstar Reincarnation set and a Droll and Lockbird in your hand, you wait for your opponent to add a card from the deck to the hand after the draw phase, chain 1 Droll and Lockbird, chain 2 to Trickstar Reincarnation, so they have to discard your entire hand, and they have no hand. They can't draw anymore. because you chained Droll and Lockbird to it. So it completely leaves your opponent wide open, you know, for you to take advantage and hopefully kill them with a Grand Maju, or you can stall for time with regards to getting the main win condition of this deck. And the next card that I have is in case you're forced to go second, because this is a going first build, and your opponent puts up a really hard negate board to break. I have 2 Raw Spear mode. And basically, for those that are unfamiliar, is that it cannot be special summon, requires 3 tributes from either side of the field to normal summon, and then you shift control of this card's owner back to yourself during your opponent's end phase. So if they go first, if they build a really good negate board, you can tribute 3 other monsters, put spear mode on the field, it goes back to you, and then it goes back to your turn, and then at the end of their turn it goes back to you. So anyway, great card for getting rid of the negate boards, and it can actually get past the barrier statue of the winds because it's not a special summon, it's a tribute summon. So a good way to get over any board that takes advantage of the barrier statue of the wind or any of the other barrier statues, as long as they have 3 monsters on the field. Alright, with regards to spells, guys, the majority of the spells are going to be draw power, and lots of it, because you really want to get the win condition of this deck as soon as possible, especially when you go first. So what we have is we have 3 Allure of Darkness. Anyone who's familiar with the deck that I normally play knows what this card is. Draw 2 cards, then banish 1 dark monster from your hand, or if you do not have any in your hand, send your entire hand to the graveyard. So your dark targets are obviously your Liliths and your Necrofaces. Necroface is a great card to banish off of Allure of Darkness, because if you banish the Necroface off Allure of Darkness, you get to draw 2, and you also get to banish 5 cards from your deck and your opponent's deck. So, alright, next draw power, 3 Pot of Duality. So, reveal the top 3 cards of your deck, add 1 of them to your hand, and shuffle the rest into your deck. You can only activate 1 Pot of Duality per turn. You really want to get the win condition of this deck as fast as possible. So with Pot of Duality, hopefully you'll get your Banquet of Millions or Dynamite off your Pot of Duality, because those are the 2 main cards that you need to look out for. Okay, because of the recent ban list, we only have 1 Pot of Desires, so banish 10 cards from the top of your deck, face down, draw 2. And you can only activate 1 Pot of Desires per turn. Doesn't really matter, you can only use 1 anyway. Okay, and we have Cards of Demise. So draw until you have 3 cards in your hand. Also for the rest of the turn, after this card resolves, your opponent takes no damage. During the end phase of this turn, send your entire hand to the graveyard. You can only activate 1 card of Demise per turn. You cannot special summon during the turn you activate this card. Be very careful if using this card. Personally, I wait until main phase 2 to activate this card, because if you have a normal summon Grand Maju, you can actually attack and do damage to your opponent. And then if you go into main phase 2 and you don't have any cards left in hand, you can activate Card Demise, and hopefully you'll get 3 cards, or 3 spells and 3 traps, you know, so that you can get the tools for the OTK. Okay, card everybody hates to see, and it's very divisive. We have 2 Mystic Mine. Basically, Mystic Mine is just a stall tactic until you get the cards that you're looking for in order to perform the OTK on this deck. I always reassure people when I play locals that this is not your typical Mystic Mine shenanigans. They don't have to worry about Skull, the Goddess of the Oracle. They don't have to worry about Dark Bribe or Solemn Judgment. You know, it's not that kind of Final Countdown lockdown deck, because everybody hates to see the card. And, you know, like I said, you know, I am a supporter of the card, especially if the game state reaches a point where people build negate boards where people just can't play anymore. But a lot of people feel that this card should be banned. Personally, I think the card should be limited to 1, but it's absolutely necessary in this deck. Oh yeah, and I forgot to explain it. So if your opponent controls more monsters than you 2, your opponent cannot activate monster effects or declare an attack. If you control more monsters than your opponent does, you cannot activate monster effects or declare an attack. Once per turn during the end phase, if both players control the same number of monsters, destroy this card. Another great use with this card is that if your opponent has a lot of monsters out, but no Omni negates, no spell negates, nothing like that, You can activate Mystic Mine, and you can summon one Grand Maju if you have enough banished cards, and you can still attack, and you can still do a ton of damage to your opponent. So, sorry about that little flub, guys. Okay, and the final spell card, 1 gold sarcophagus. So, banish 1 card from your deck face up during your second standby phase. After this card's activation, add the card to the hand. Main target you want to use for this, Necroface. It can give you deck knowledge about what your opponent is playing. You banish the Necroface, you get to banish top 5 from your deck and your opponent's deck. You can get to see what your opponent's playing and how to adjust accordingly. And you get the Necroface back at your second, at the end of your second standby phase. So that means if you've already used Banquet of Millions and you got your extra deck gone, it can replenish your extra deck again, so you can use Banquet of Millions again. Alright, now we have traps, guys, and this is the real star. These traps are the real stars of this deck. So the first trap that we have is personally the biggest star of the deck, Banquet of Millions. Basically what the card does is banish any number of cards from your extra deck face down, banish the same number of random face down cards from your opponent's extra deck face up until the end phase. You can only activate 1 Banquet of Millions per turn. This card is only really useful if your opponent is playing with a full extra deck. This deck will not do well against True Draco and Monarchs and any other deck types that do not use the extra deck or have very little in the extra deck. You want your opponent to have a full 15 card extra deck, because you activate this, you banish your entire extra deck, they banish theirs. So a lot of decks that do rely on the extra deck, they don't have the ability to kill you if they go second. And personally, I think it's a severely underrated card. I think it's a great stall card. I think it's a great card that can really shut your opponent down. And now we have the win condition of this deck, guys. And that is the D.D Dynamite. Boom goes the dynamite, folks. So what this card does is inflict 300 points to your opponent's life points for each of the opponent's cards that are removed from play. So guys, what the key combo with this card is 1 Banquet of Millions and 2 Dynamite. If you get 1 Banquet of Millions and they have a full extra deck, that's 15 cards. And for each Dynamite you activate, that's 4,500 damage. 2 Dynamite, that's 9,000 damage, and that's game. This is the combo that you want to go for as soon as possible. You want to try to get down 1 Banquet of Millions on your opening turn and 2 Dynamite. Or better yet, 1 Banquet of Millions, 1 Dynamite, and 1 Trap Trick. And if you don't have those, if you don't have that combination, then you have plenty of stall tactics. Like I said, you got your Grand Maju. If you set a Grand Maju and you activate a Banquet of Millions, they don't know what you have set face down, and you have a 6,000 defensive Grand Maju face down. And if opponent normal summons a monster and they slam into the Grand Maju, that could give them enough damage that you could kill them with just 1 Dynamite. But this Dynamite is the true star of the show in this deck. And the other card that I just talked about, guys, Trap Trick. And banish 1 normal trap from your deck, except Trap Trick, and set 1 card with the same name directly from your deck. Also, it can be activated this turn, so you can only activate 1 Trap Trick for the rest of this turn after this card resolves, and you can only activate 1 Trap Trick per turn. So you don't necessarily need 1 Banquet of Millions and 2 pure Dynamite on the field. If you have a Banquet of Millions, a Dynamite, and a Trap Trick, you activate the Banquet of Millions in the draw phase, then you activate Dynamite, and then you chain Trap Trick in the standby phase, and then that's 4,500 damage there. Trap Trick sets the other Dynamite, and once the opponent transitions in the main phase 1, you activate the second Dynamite, and then you got game. Just plain and simple as that. Okay, other traps that we have in this deck, we have Trickstar Reincarnation, just to slow your opponent down, and also combine this card with Droll and Lockbird. And if your opponent doesn't have an Ash, then you can get rid of their entire hand. And that can often stall enough time for you to get the main combination you need, regardless if you want to go with the win condition with the D.D Dynamite Banquet of Millions, or if you have enough banished cards that you can go in with Grand Maju for game. So with Trickstar Reincarnation is banish your opponent's entire hand. If you do, they draw the same number of cards you can banish this card from the graveyard and then target one Trickstar monster to your graveyard, special summon it, but we don't use Trickstar monsters in this deck at all. Right, next card we have, guys. It's just more protective cards if you're forced to go second. We got 2 Infinite Imperm. So this card can be activated in the hand. If you hit a specific monster, that's their choke point on that specific deck, this card can be incredibly useful, but it can also be good on your turn 1 as well, especially if you don't have the cards that you need for the OTK condition. If you control no cards, you can activate this card from your hand, target one face-up monster your opponent controls, negate its effects until the end of this turn, and if this card was set before activation and is on the field at resolution for the rest of the turn, all other spell and traps in the column are negated. So definitely one of the most powerful traps in the game. It's had several reprints, but it's still highly desirable, but I think they've had a common reprint in one of the structure decks, so if you can pick one up, go for it. Alright guys, and the final traps, just a couple of one-ofs. Macrocosmos, personally my favorite, one of my favorite stun cards, but you can only have one of them. When this card resolves, you can special summon one Helios, the primordial sun, from your hand or deck. You don't do that, but while this card is face up on the field, any card sent to the graveyard is banished instead. Basically, Eldritch hates this card, unless they have their Scarlet Sanguine and Conquistador play, but it's really hard for Eldritch to play around this card, and it's a great card, you know, to stall for time, you know, against your opponent as well. And finally, guys, we have one Metaverse for the Mystic Mind on your opponent's turn. So take one field spell from your deck and either activate it or add it to your hand. But as far as I know, you got to be careful with this card because it can be ashed. Alright guys, on to the extra deck. Extra deck's not really special, it's mostly fodder for the Banquet of Millions, but we do have cards in here to deal in case the situation comes up where we both need to use them. So it's pretty much all one-ofs. So Relinquished Anima. Your level 1 monsters are Droll, so summon Droll, link off to Anima, and if an opponent has a monster where the arrow is, then you can steal it. You can go yoink, and that's your monster for the taking. So one Link Karibo, poison the monster, declares an attack, you contribute a card, change the opponent's monster to 0 until the end phase, and then if this card is in your graveyard, you contribute one level 1 monster, special summon this card, and you can only use the effect once per turn. So if you got a Droll, Link Karibo's in your graveyard, get rid of the Droll, Karibo comes out. Okay, we got the Nightmare package, Cerberus, Phoenix, Unicorn. Cerberus takes care of any special summon monster in the main monster zones, not in the extra monster zone. Discard one card. The Poppet, Nightmare Phoenix, is pretty much the same, but it can get rid of one back row. And Nightmare Unicorn, pretty much discard one card, and it sends one card on the field back into the deck. So standard play, a lot of people play with the Nightmare package. And what we have, guys, it's kind of pointless to go over these, but they're pretty much Waking the Dragon targets. So probably the best ones to go for: Blue Eyes Alternative Ultimate Dragon, Red Dragon Archfiend Abyss, Ultimate Raid Raptor, Last Warrior from Another Planet. Just in case you want to stall your opponent out or need to put an Omni Negate on the field. Other Waking the Dragon targets: Flower Guardian Light Flare, Natria Beast, Nutter Falcon, and Crystal Wing Synchro Dragon. So my wife, the Dragon Lady, told me that these are the best Waking the Dragon targets, so, and Waking the Dragon is one of the side deck cards. And the final two extra deck cards, guys, is in case you play in any kind of Dogmatica matchup. I love having two Elder Entity Entis because Dogmatica players love to get their Maximus out, and they get to send two cards from the extra deck to the graveyard, and they make you send two extra cards from your extra deck to the graveyard. So if they do that, I always say the Entis, because if it does go to the grave, then you get to pop anything on the field. So it's a great card, and you're bound to come across somebody playing Dogmatica, Shaddoll, Shaddoll Invoked, or any of the other Dogmatica variants. All right, guys, what we have for the side, side deck, and the side deck is really important because this deck is weak to a lot of specific cards, specifically Lancia and Red Reboot. And so you want cards that will protect you from that, and you also want cards to protect you from any back row destruction if you have a field, if you have your back row set, and you don't want them to destroy it. So for Lancias or any other hand traps, we have Solemn Strike. So when a monster would be special summoned or a monster effect is activated, pay $1,500 to negate the summon or activation. If you do, destroy the card. Pretty standard. Alright guys, for Red Reboot and any other degenerate cards, we got 3 Solemn Judgment. You don't really care about your life points at all, so pay half your life points to negate the activation of a spell, trap card, normal summon, flip summon, special summon, and destroy the spell, trap card, or summon monster. So pretty standard. This is usually a common card if I have to go into the side deck. Okay, another great hand trap if you're forced to go second, Dimension Shifter. So Dimension Shifter, if you have no cards in your graveyard, you can send this card from your hand to the graveyard until the end of the next turn. Any card sent to the graveyard is banished instead. It's a great card to stop your opponent from going on whiffed or plays. It's not really good against Flunders because Flunders count under monsters getting banished, you know, to get their effects. But even if you don't get a chance to use Dimension Shifter, it's still material for Allure of Darkness if you need to draw extra cards, you know, to get your OTK condition. Since there's a lot of degenerate token decks kicking around, especially Sword Soul and the Adventurer tokens, Token Collector, usually this card will shut those decks right down. So if you can get a hold of Token Collectors, please do. Basically, if a token is special summoned during the damage step, you can special summon this card from the graveyard. And if it was there when the token was special summoned or hand, even if not, you can only use the effect of Token Collector once per turn. If this card is special summoned, destroy as many tokens on the field as possible. If you do, this card gains 400 attack for each token destroyed. Neither player can special summon tokens. So it can definitely shut Sword Soul and the Adventurer token engine down. Alright guys, if you're going against a deck that's very control heavy, has a lot of degenerate back row, your standard back row removal, so 1 Harpist Feather Duster destroys all your opponents' back row cards, and 2 Lightning Storm in this deck as well. So Lightning Storm, if you control no face-up cards, activate one of these effects, destroy all attack position monsters your opponent controls, or destroy all spells and traps your opponent controls. And you can only activate 1 per turn. So just standard back row removal in case the deck that you're going against is a very control or a back row heavy deck, you know, like Eldritch or anything along those lines. And finally guys, the ultimate troll card, 1 Waking the Dragon. So if this set card is in its own owner's control, left the field because an opponent's effect and is now in the graveyard or banished, you can special summon 1 monster from your deck or extra deck. So, main card I go after is either Last Warrior or Ultimate Raid Raptor Falcon, Ultimate Falcon. So it's a great card to bait your opponent out to use back row destruction, but having more than 1 can often be really bricky, so you know, it's just a great card if you don't have any other plays. Anyway guys, that is the deck profile, but before we leave, I just want to reiterate what you really need with this deck for to get the win condition. And with all the draw power, it's actually relatively easy. Basically, you just need 3 cards. And with all the draw power and all the ways to shut your opponent down or to stall him out, really, these are the only 3 cards that you need for your win condition. So you need 1 Banquet of Millions, 1 D.D Dynamite, 1 Trap Trick. That's it. And if your opponent has a full extra deck of 15 cards, you can kill your opponent the moment they go into their draw phase and standby phase. And the key thing is to get 15 banished cards in their graveyard, in their banished zone, and get 2 dynamites to go off, and that's 4,500 damage each for 9,000, and it's game. Just remember, the amount of cards that you need in your opponent's banished zone to kill them if they have not taken any damage at all is 27. you can kill them with 1 dynamite, but they need 27 cards in the banished zone. I have done that before with 2 Trickstar reincarnations and 1 Banquet of Millions and 1 dynamite. That puts, if they have a full extra deck, that puts 27 cards in their banished zone, 1 D.D Dynamite, and it's game. So it's a relatively cost-efficient deck to make. I don't think it's terribly expensive, and it's awfully trolly for those players that want to add a little trolly flavor to their deck. So anyway, guys, that is the deck profile. So anyway, this is Just the Regular Guy signing off, and the theme for this deck is Boom Goes the Dynamite. So as Dragon Lady often says, play the game, not the fame, and take care.